Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So this part is about Python iteration, or sometimes we call it as looping or repetition, so it carries the same thing. Previously, we looked at the programming structure, so we know how programming structure for iteration or looping looks like, but we do not know exactly how to write the script in Python for iteration, looping, or repetition. So this is what we are going to look at, which is how do we write a script for iteration, looping, or repetition using Python syntax. So there are two types of looping programming structure in Python. Number one is while, number two is for. So later on you'll be able to see how do we use while and how do we use for. So before we start writing the script for using while, so we have to first understand in writing the script for looping in Python, we have to initialize our variable. Usually what we do is that we just simply write our variable, but we do not have to put any value in it. So we have the value, but we don't have to necessarily initialize every variable. But especially for looping, it is necessary to initialize our value for variable, so that when the looping starts, it knows should it start counting from 0, or should it start counting from -1? Should it start counting with 1? Should it start counting with 5? So that's the reason why we need to initialize the value. The word initialize means that you have to set initially what is the value of the variable before you ask your script to do some repetition or to do looping. So it doesn't matter what is the value of your variable as long as you put a value to your variable. So it can be in the form of x equals to x plus 1. So it can be in the form of x equals to 0, or you can also tell your program that you want to increase the value or decrease the value later on. But first, you have to initialize the value first. Meaning to say, for example, let's say the name of my variable is x, so I put the initial value of x is 0. Or I can have my initial value of x is 5. So my counting will later start from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's say, if I want to decrease, I want to ask my program to keep counting, but -1 for every value every time it counts. So you will later see this in an example. And when we add x equals to x plus 1, when we add 1 to our variable, we call that as increment. And if we -1 from our variable, we call that as decrement. This is just a terminology that I want to explain to you what it means by increment and decrement. So we look at the while loop. So let us start with while loop. So while loop is one of the looping constructs available in Python. Usually it ties with expression true or false. Now, how do we write that one? So the syntax for while loop is you write the word while, and then you write the condition or expression in the parentheses, and then you put that a colon at the end of your while syntax, and then you can proceed with writing the statement. So this statement can be in the form of if else, or in the form of function. For example, you can have print, you can have something else under the syntax while. Okay, so it evaluates whether the condition is true or false. If the condition here is false, then the statement here will not be executed. But if the condition here is true, so this statement here will be executed. So that is basically how a while works on. Okay. Okay. So when we look at the structure, the looping structure, so this is what happened for while loop. So when we can have a script up here, okay, and then once it enters the while loop, for example, so we can have our condition here. Let's say n is more than 5. So if whatever enters here, the value of n is more than 5, okay, if this one is true, which is, for example, the value of n that enters the loop is 6. So this means that this condition, this expression is true. So the body of while will be executed. But if the value that enters the loop, let's say, for example, the value of n that enters the loop is 4, so this means this is false because the condition is n has to be more than 5. So if n equals to 4, this is false. So this one will not be executed and it will exit the while loop. So this is what it means and this is what it looks like in a flow chart. Okay. Now, let's say I have an example of a countdown program. As I said before, so we need to set the initial value of the variable. Let's say the name of my variable is 5 and I want to create a small program that can count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then the word Happy New Year appears. So, the initial value that I want the computer program to start counting is 5. So I put here n equals to 5. And then, as long as the n value is more than 0, I want the program to print the value of n and then to minus the value of n with 1, and then I want to repeat this one as long as the value of n is more than 0. Once the value of n reaches n equals to 0, or it won't reach -1, of course, okay, so once it reaches n equals to 0, this one will not be executed and this one will be printed out. You see here, this is indented inside and this is de-indented. Okay, this one is de-indented. So the print Happy New Year doesn't belongs to the body of while. So this is the body of while. Okay. Now, the output of this program is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Do you think 0 will appear? No, 0 will not appear. And I will explain to you why. So this will be the output for the program. Okay, so this is what happens. So the initial value of n is 5. And as long as the value of n is more than 0, I want the program to print the value of n and then minus that value of n with 1 and then repeat this process. Now, the value of n is 5. Okay. N equals to 5. Is n more than 0? The answer is yes. This condition is true. So, they will print the value n, which is 5, and then they minus the value of n, which is 5, minus 1, which is now the value of n is 4. Now, the value of n is 4 and it will test again. Is n, which is the value of n is 4, more than 0? This would be yes, because the value of n is 4. So it is more than 0. So print again the value of n. Now the value of n is 4. So they print out 4. So minus 1 from 4. So 4 minus 1, that will be 3. Now the value of n is 3. So test again the value of n 3. Is the value of n 3 more than 0? That would be yes. 3 is more than 0. So they will print again n, which is now the value of n is 3. So now they print the value of 3. And then they minus 1 from 3, which is 2. 3 minus 1 is equals to 2. Now the value of n is 2. Then test again. Is 2 or n more than 0? The answer is yes. 2 is more than 0. So print n, which is the value of 2. So they print out 2. And then minus 1 from 2, which is 1. So 2 minus 1 is 1. So test again, 1, is it more than 0? Yes, print 1. So now the value of n is 1. They print 1 and then 1 minus 1, which is 0. Is 0 more than 0? That would be false. So 0 will not print it out. They will print straight away Happy New Year. That is why I explained 0 will not be printed out here because it doesn't execute this one. They straight away print Happy New Year. When this one becomes false, okay, once it becomes false, the condition here becomes false, then they will exit the while loop like the one we saw here. Once it becomes false, okay, once it becomes false, then it will execute, it will exit the loop. Okay, so this is what happened here. That's why it doesn't appear 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0 Happy New Year, but it only appears 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and then Happy New Year. Okay, so this is while loop. Okay, we look at another example. Okay, let's say I have 3 variables. Okay, the first variable is total, the second variable is count, the third variable is number. I have 3 variables and I initialize the value for the variable total, which is it starts with 0, count, it also starts with 0, and then number, I don't initialize the value. Okay, but I just say I want my user to input, to key in a number less than 10. And I tell my program, as long as the count is less than 10, I want the computer program to take the value of total, which is 0, the initial value of 0, and plus that with number. Number is whatever number key in by user here. Let's say user key in the number 2. So now the value of total is 2. 0 plus 2 is 2. And take the value of count, which is initially 0, and then plus 1. So count, now the value of count is 1. Okay, now check again. Now the total of count is 1. Is 1 is still less than 0. Sorry, count is still less than 10. So this one will be added again. So the user will be asked again. The number of total will be added again. 2 plus the number again, which is 2. Okay, and then count. Now the value of count is 1. So 1 will be plus 1 again, which is now the value of count is 2. So is 2 less than 0? Yes, this is true. So this one will be executed again. This one will be executed again. And then they will take note of what is the value of count. Now the value of count is 3. Then this one is still true again. So this one will be carried out again. And this one will be executed again until the value of count is more than 10. So it becomes false. So this will be no longer executed. And the total sum of all 10 numbers will be printed out. So this is what happens in this program as well. Okay, so you have to understand how the program works, how the while is repeating. So it is very important for you to understand how this while is repeating and how the value of count is being, what is the last value of count. So you have to keep track of that. Okay, then only you are able to predict what would be later on the final value of total. Okay, so this is what is very important in while loop. Remember, for while syntax, okay, you have to write the word while, and then you can have a parenthesis. In the latest version, you do not have to have the parenthesis, but here you have to put in the condition. What is the condition that you want to set? And then you have to have a colon, and then you can proceed with indented statement inside your while loop. Okay, so you can have else or if else in your while loop. So for example here, else, then it will print goodbye, and it will also start counting. So remember, you have to put the counter. The initial value of the counter is 0. Okay, and then you add the value of counter as you go on, and it will repeat until the value of counter is more than 3 or is equal to 3. It will stop at value of counter is equal to 3. So the counter will stop, and then it will exit this loop. Okay, that is how you write your script for while loop. So we will look after this, how do we write a script for loop.